talked the other night. I don't know if it was one night with you, and I know with a couple of Bud Shaw and a couple others. We talked about the position of linebacker, which looks on paper for the Browns to be one of the weak position, but it used to be such a glamour position in the '60s and the '70s with names that just sounded like big tough linebackers, Nitschke and Lambert and Sam Huff and guys like that. Now it seems like the glamour position, I think, is the defensive edge rusher.
Well, yeah, and then we know that Pro Football Focus, which has the attention of basically every team in the NFL, and rightly so in a lot of cases, because they crunch the numbers like few, if any, in the sport. Pro Football Focus talks about how that back end of the defense is just as, if not more important than, uh, the front four, or the front three, or what have you. So, and when you look at what the Browns might play, that 4-2-5 alignment, you say, okay, maybe you can
Well,
hide linebacker weaknesses easier in that situation. So,
what happened
I
to
do
the
agree there are question marks.
what happened to the great nicknames, the Purple People Eaters and guys like that? That was fun,
Well,
but I think the game has changed.
yeah,
I think
nicknames are difficult these days. It seems like when the players give themselves nicknames, all they want to do is add a Y or an IE to the end of the name. We know not a player, a former player, but a manager loves to do that. Terry Francona
right.
with Millsy and Ozzy and Frankie and Johnny and Paulie. I mean, he loves to add the E to everybody's name.
Yeah, baseball is a little easier. All right. Speaking of the defensive line positions, the most pressures since 2018 belong to Cameron Jordan of the Saints, 161, Von Miller of the Broncos, 151, Khalil Mack of the Bears, 148, and Myles Garrett is number 4 in that lineup with 26 games, 131 pressures. The value of Garrett, according to Brandon Little of Sports Illustrated, he says, as most of you know, the Browns will soon make Myles Garrett the highest paid defensive end in the NFL. Garrett will likely eclipse the $23.5 million annually that Khalil Mack makes. If not, it's going to be close. The defensive end position can make up for a bad linebacking core or secondary play just by putting pressure, getting some pushes. And Garrett has been an example of this at times, and he's been that since he's been in the orange and brown. Cleveland has one of the best important positions on the gridiron. So the question is, if they don't have the linebackers, can Myles Garrett actually make up for the lack of the linebackers? What do you think?
Of course, he could less, but I'm going to be consistent with how I've been on your show in recent weeks. I'm in a show me mode with Myles Garrett. Not tell me, and I know you say, well, what do you mean show me? You just saw how dominant he could be. He's coming off of a year in which he was suspended. He cost his team dearly. He potentially cost a GM his job, a head coach his job. And I'm not saying the Browns aren't better off without Dorsey or without Kitchens. I'm just saying that even if the Browns go 3-3 in the games that Garrett missed, well, I don't know how many they won out of that stretch, but the bottom line is they could have been better if Myles had played the entire season and not gone off the rails and swung the helmet at Mason Rudolph. So to me, yeah, he's going to get his money, and that's all well and good, and he's going to look good in the gym. But I want 16 games, and I want nonstop productivity. I know he shows flashes where he dominates, but I want to see him dominate game after game after game.
First of all, I think he understands that. Second of all, I think I'm trying to think of anybody else on the team that I would say make a switch and say, okay, you got to come back from what Myles Garrett came from. I think he's the guy. It should have never happened, but I think he's the guy that couldn't get out of it better than almost anybody on this team.
Okay, and right. I mean, everything I read and heard about him before the incident was that he was a gentle giant, mild mannered, great dude, but he had the ability to get, shall we say, nasty on the field, at least breathing fire. And then he has that incident with the helmet. But we do know that he had that punch at the beginning of the season as well that wasn't called, I believe, against the Titans. They're going to get after him. The other teams are going to talk to him, and they're going to make some comments to him that try to trigger him. So it's going to be up to Myles Garrett to suppress any and all impulses to retaliate, and that will be a challenge.
All right, we're going to